So, thank you once again for joining me to talk all things vertical drama. I'm really happy to talk to this person. Firstly, because she's also a Jen or Jenny, because obviously the best name ever. But also she is a really successful screenwriter, and I know a lot of you are fascinated in finding out how vertical dramas are written, what the process is, maybe how to get into the industry. So I'm going to ask Jenny to give a little intro of herself to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jenny. I am a long-term writer, lover of books and film, and I'm very happy that vertical dramas have emerged onto the scene because it's just a marriage of two things that I love, which is romance, anything romance, books and film and TV, sort of all smashed into one place. So that's really fun. I'm a screenwriter. I used to work at Reelshort, and I'm working with Alta TV. I really enjoyed both experiences and have been able to just be on this wild ride of seeing so many incredible shows come to life, watching my colleagues put together shows in records amount of time and then seeing them just take off and have impact on fans around the world. So it's just been really fun. And yeah, I'm excited to be here. It'll be fun.
So my first question is, where did you grow up, and when did you first start writing stories?
Oh, I grew up in Virginia. I was adopted. So I guess originally I was born in Oklahoma, which I do not remember at all because I was only a few days old. And then I grew up in Virginia with my mom and my sister, and my grandmother was a librarian. So there were
Oh,
books everywhere. And it was very interesting because for a long time I was like, I'm not going to be a reader. I'm not going to do it. I like film and television much better, which horrified my grandmother. She was like, that will not be in this house. So, of course, eventually when you're surrounded by books all the time, you fall in love with them. And I started writing, I think, first or second grade. I entered like a poetry contest and actually placed, which was very bizarre. But I loved
wow.
writing poetry and I loved the just everything about the written word, and I loved stories. Bedtime stories was like my favorite time because I'm a 90s kid, so the imagination is on is on all the time. So it was really fun. Um, but then I ended up spending a lot of my summers in England. I went to school in England for a time. So I was traveling a lot. So I've sort of always had this like dual life between the UK, Europe, and the United States, which has really influenced like being able to write and just having a larger sense of different places. So um, I ended up going into being an English major. Surprise. And reading more. And I was very excited about fiction, and I'm a big young adult novel fan. This is my bread and butter. And I got very into it, and I discovered Wattpad. And I really wanted to try out, okay, how can I tell stories to an audience that's like right there, that will respond, and I can see what do they like, what do they not like? Because if I want to get published, like, shouldn't I know what they like first? I figured like we can do a stab in the dark, but why not test it out? And that's sort of what started me on this whole writing journey. So it's been fun. Yeah.
And Wattpad's kind of this amazing gift, isn't it? Because I guess before Wattpad,
Yeah.
all you could do as a writer is press your book on friends, send it
Yep.
out to agents, and hope you maybe get some feedback. I
Yeah.
mean, Wattpad's a community of readers who are there, and you
Yeah.
can instantly see that feedback of like they're all going, "We want more. I
Yeah.
like this bit. I like this character."
I
Um,
loved it. Yeah.
and did you find that as soon as you started doing that, you were adapting your storytelling to what the readers were telling you?
I was more, I did some adaptation, but I was more focused on seeing what was resonating with them, which beats they responded to, really emotionally. And because it was
Mm.
nice to comment directly into the story. Um, Way back in the early Wattpad days, we would do there was a forum so everyone could share their work. And I've also loved critiquing and giving notes on work and just giving feedback and telling people how excited I am about what they're doing. So a lot of us would trade back and forth, and it was wonderful because you'd find so many brilliant writers that way. And then they would give feedback on your work, and it became very clear, like what's working, what's not working. So for future drafts or when you go on to publishing, like you already had a sense of, okay, this worked, this didn't quite work. The readers really responded to this. They didn't. So it definitely gave you a emotional map of what was really resonating with viewers. And I've always been just excited about people reacting to, your characters and the crazy circumstances you put them in.
So you mentioned a love for YA novels. Was that something you discovered as a teenager, or was it something you discovered older? Now, I'm asking this because when I was a teenager, there were very few YA novels. I remember I pretty much read what would have been classed that in the library, and there was nothing else. But when I was in my 20s and working as a bookseller, that's when the YA market exploded, and I kind of read everything then. It's like, I'm a grown-up, but I didn't want to read about single girls in the city. I wanted to relive my teen years and read all the YA books. So
Yes,
how did that happen for you?
Yeah, I think it was in college. I stumbled across I don't even remember who it was first. I got very interested in the YA space through Wattpad because I said, okay, these are the tropes and this is what's successful here, but what is mainstream publishing doing? Because I really wanted to study the work that successful YA writers were doing. I really wanted to know everything I could know about voicing. I wanted to know what I could know about their structure, their pacing. I go into reading in a bizarre way, and that it's not just for enjoyment, but I'm literally breaking down what the writers are doing, what affects me, what affects people who read the stories, what moments they talk about. So I fell in love with, I think it was, E.L. Lockhart. We Were Liars was one of the most beautiful, still to this day, one of the most beautiful pieces of fiction I've ever read. The voicing was just gorgeous. And I said, I want to really learn how to hit these beats. I loved John Green. John Green made a humongous impression because it was just their ability to capture the fragility and the volatility of YA of that time was so gorgeous. And also their depictions of first love and loss, I thought were incredible. So with them sort of kicking open the door and seeing that there were writers who I just fell in love with, I wanted to be able to just absorb everything that I could. So this was like early college, and I was reading and studying and then trying to apply what I was learning to my stories because I wanted to, I was like, I want to always be constantly improving and get to the level where I can read it and say that, like, am I doing what they're doing on the page? So
It's really interesting you mentioning John Green, because I know obviously sometimes one of people's things about verticals is that they're all kind of, you have similar stories. But I mean, that's the same with books. So obviously obviously John Green has written a lot of books that are all wonderful, but Fault Among Our Stars is the one that kind of went absolutely mega.
Yeah.
But then obviously every publisher was then looking for a similar book. And I remember this poor teenager, we had a table and it was all those books. And they were like, I want to read something where people don't die. And we were like, it's kind of not really where publishing's at the moment. Sorry. It's like, yeah.
I remember that era. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. You're not going to get a happy ending. I'm sorry.
Like, they're all beautiful, but yeah, I can't give you any comedy. I think the only other stuff I could offer them was like, well, it's either that or like dystopia, because it was like sort of tail end of Hunger Games and all those books. It's like
just like death or end of the world. I know. Which one? I remember that. That was such a big thing. It was like everyone is dying or the world is ending and everything's terrible, but it's so beautifully executed. You're not going to care so much by the time you get to the end. But I do recall that. Yeah, that was but it is true. Like there are those. Like publishing also has those mirror moments where we'll see books within a sort of a similar, not just genre, but just, similar ideas, similar plots, but they're all executed so differently. And this is the argument I always make for verticals. I was like, listen, there's a vertical for everyone. And I think that there are, I know people like to say, oh, well, you just like billionaire romance. I was like, there's a lot of nuance there. There's people who like certain types, there's certain tropes, setups that they like. There's certain actors who they're really drawn to. And they're just saying, listen, I want your version of that. So, don't shame people for their preferences. Okay. These are really fun. I love the fact that verticals do have the amount of variation now. And you've watched the same story on traditional film and television a million times. You may not know it, but you have. So we always, there's only so many original ideas. And I think that the idea of recycling or revisiting something that works, it's not a problem. It's just a place where you can sort of explore creativity, I think.
I think that's such a good point, because, I mean, obviously we know there's gazillions of versions of the Cinderella story or, Pride and Prejudice kind of, the enemies to lovers thing. But yeah, I'm quite happy to watch them. If it's bringing something new, or as you said, a different actor, that's like, it's not a problem for me. Same. I like seeing, I read an article that says our brain actually likes being able to compare and going, that's different and that's the same. And it's like our brain like gets off on it, but apparently it fires up chemicals. So yeah.
That totally makes sense. Yeah.
So once you've been working on Wattpad and honing your craft, what's the move then of how do you go from that? Because there's probably quite a lot of people who can say, yeah, I'm on Wattpad. How do you go from that to working in the film industry?
It was very odd with Wattpad. Pretty shortly after I started uploading stories, they got a lot of attention. And they started going viral. And the platform approached me about saying, listen, do you want to be a part of our creators program? I placed pretty highly in a international competition, writing competition. And at that point, it started to become sort of clear you need to take this a bit more seriously. It's not just, fun and games on Wattpad. There's potential for a career here. And then later on, when I started really delving into more mainstream YA, Enemies to Lovers, which you will never separate me from because I love those. That book, Cheater, Faker, Troublemaker, blew up. And that's how I ended up getting a book deal, audio book deal with Hachette, transitioning into traditional publishing and understanding what those requirements were, because there was a whole different process working with that team. My team at Hachette versus Wattpad, totally different. And then that's how I got introduced to Crazy Maple. Because a friend of mine said, "Oh, they just did an adaptation of my book into a game," and I was like, "That's so cool," because I'm a nerd and I love games. So I was like, "Yes, that's awesome." And so we got in touch, and they were very interested in adapting Cheater, Faker, Troublemaker for one of their early YA choices apps. So they were very much into the choose your own adventure. Early in the game, eventually chapters. And it was called Spotlight. It was a tiny little YA app, but it was really cool for me to see it as a game. And my mentor at the time was like, you're very focused on traditional publishing. Why don't you focus on other adaptations there are other ways that your media can be, your stories can be told. And I was like, that's very interesting. I should widen my scope. Because I wasn't sure. I was like, do I want to submit to agents? I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And then Verticals came along years later. I worked in publishing for a bit, and then I jumped into working in production here in Los Angeles once I came back from living in Europe for a time. And I was really excited about the prospect of, I was like, oh, cool, we're working on these new things called verticals. And no one knew what they were. No one on set. We were like, well, we kind of have an idea. We're not quite sure. And so I was very interested in seeing how differently these stories were told. And that's when I was on set. One of the representatives was like, oh, I did your story. I was the one who turned your book into a mobile game. And I said, that is crazy. This is such a small world. What are you guys doing now? And so we chatted, and I got to know more about sort of the vision for where, they were going. And then what we now know is Reelshort, which has become just an incredible powerhouse. And then a few months later, I was working for them as a staff writer, which I loved, specifically in romance, which could not be, I mean, that's a dream. Is to get to write romances every day. You can't complain. Yeah.
So for a standard writer or maybe a screenwriter, what are the key things that are going to be a shock to them, or what they're going to have to adapt from writing a vertical?
Well, you have to forget everything that you know. Your pacing is throw it out the window. You do not have the time to establish things, to build characters, to ABCD lines. Many of those things go away completely. You're not writing for plot, complexity, crazy amounts of twists. This audience is a very different audience that processes things emotionally first. And you have a very short amount of time to make an impression. So being able to set up the stakes for characters, communicate them very quickly and efficiently, and in a way that will stop them from scrolling, right? If they're going through their phones. And I remember being told, this is something to where this is a mobile first form of, advertising, and it's a mobile first medium. So if you're sitting there expecting the attention span and the time that someone does when they go to Netflix, that's not the same viewer. That's not the same audience. This audience really wants something to jump off the page and grab them. And so a lot of people say, well, why are the storylines, so over the top and so insane? Why is there so much drama? I was like, these are people who are on the go, they're moving, they're living their lives, but you have to pull them out of that for a moment and let them escape into a really fun, exciting, high octane world that's going to keep them entertained, but also doesn't ask too much. It's not asking them to sit down for multiple seasons and, deal with prestige and the complexity of dialogue. It's not about that. It's a completely different format. And things are changing. Obviously, the way stories are being told is evolving, and it's really interesting seeing how that's changing. But if you're coming in from traditional screenwriting, you have to let go of what you know and start understanding how this verticals work based on how they're advertised. Because even before their stories, they're a product. So you have to understand that switch, which might be a little bit different creatively for writers who are very much like, character story forward. Those things are still very important, but the way in which these are consumed and how they're presented to the public is completely different. So you have to get a sense of that before you sort of jump into the page, or you're going to struggle. So, yeah.
Okay, it's various things I want to follow up on that because it's such an amazing answer. Okay, the first one is I find it really interesting that you say stakes, because I feel that the audience before I was at Hallmark. So I was watching Hallmark movies. But for me, I kind of lost interest as the world has got harder around me. The stakes aren't there in Hallmark. Like the stake is pretty much like, will the family business go under? You know it won't. Will they go back to the city? Will they remember the cookies in the oven?
Exactly.
And for me, it was like, that's where it kind of lost me, because the stakes weren't there, and it didn't. So it's kind of lovely and comforting, but yeah. So that was the first thing. So it's really interesting with that. And the second thing is, and obviously that's what verticals do so brilliantly, because now if anyone goes and watches, have a look at the first few episodes and you'll realise it is stake. This could be lost. This could go wrong. If they don't do this, this will happen. How do you vary those stakes? Because I guess that's the challenge, that it always feels like there's you're narrowing the field of like, I've got to come up a new way of like terrible peril.
Yeah, it's always a challenge, and it's sitting down and thinking about how can we throw the wrench into the machine in a completely different way, or how do we do it in a familiar way, but we change that one element, and that takes a lot of tinkering. That's what it's great when you have writing teams and you're able to just bounce back ideas with your team, but sometimes you don't. And it's just you, and you're sort of in that tunnel. And the best thing to do, I would say, if you're a vertical screenwriter or hoping to jump into verticals, is that you need to study what works. Because starting with understanding the framework of what works, what captures people's attention initially, before you try to reinvent the wheel, do not try to reinvent the wheel. You are going to be very stressed if you try to reinvent the wheel. Understand what works, and then you can innovate on top of that. But you need that foundation. If you don't have that foundation, it'll make it to where you might go too far, and then the audience goes, okay, that was shocking, but it didn't really quite get my attention. There are ways and there are patterns. There are patterns that audiences have gotten used to, but also things where you can surprise them. So once you understand how the framework works, you then can start saying, all right, well, where can we get creative here? Where's a place where we have a little bit of that flexibility to invent something new? And that's where you come up with something really fun that maybe they haven't seen in a vertical before. And that's what I would suggest doing. But like just getting the foundations in to understand what works, how does it work, what gets people's attention, and then playing within that space. Yeah.
I also want to ask you about, you mentioned emotions as well, which I think is the other thing. So obviously if you come to verticals expecting, stiff upper lip British, that's not going to happen. Although we do have some stoic male characters who then, there are actually, that's not fair. There are some. What is it about the emotions, do you think, that's why it's so popular, fans? What do you think it's delivering for them?
I think it's an interesting form of catharsis. And this is something that comes out of I feel like I'm a huge K-drama fan. I think that the Korean writers are some of the best, if not the best in the world, at managing to hit emotional beats in a way that every single time is new and fresh, and every single time grabs you sort of by the collar and gets your attention. I think it's really tapping into the fact that there are collective feelings that we're all dealing with every day in our everyday stresses, subconscious stresses, subconscious, subconscious, where when you see somebody wronged, you can immediately say, that's me. I've been there, right? You may not be being slapped by your, evil stepmother, but you've been disrespected by, maybe your mother-in-law or something, or maybe you've been disrespected by someone else, or you felt stepped on. Their verticals will act out the more extreme version of things that happen to us every day, right? Where you say, this isn't fair. This feels wrong. What would it be like if I could get revenge? What would it be like if I could, end up with Prince Charming? I'm a regular girl. We've all related to this. The every girl, every man. We've all had that point where it's like, what if that magical person steps into my life and the next great love story is around the corner? We all hope for that. There's some part of us that still keeps that childlike wonder and mystery of like, what would it be like if that were me? You know, maybe I'm a cleaning lady, you know, working at a corporate office, and for some reason the CEO notices me. We know it's not real, but that doesn't mean the magic of it doesn't feel real, and that we don't want to live through that and experience that joy, or sometimes sorrow, or sometimes like that rise from someone going from the way bottom to the top. That's always incredibly satisfying, because these are deeply human needs and these are deeply human experiences that verticals tap into instantly. And when you're able to do that, you don't need a prestige studio. You do not need celebrity A-list actors. You need people who understand how to make somebody feel heard and seen on the screen in a matter of seconds. And that's what gets people's attention. I think that's what makes verticals very unique, because they do it in a really record amount of time.
Oh, thank you so much. I have a question about how you bring then the romance in as well, because I'm convinced that's another reason a lot of us hear, in that Hollywood don't really make rom-coms like they used to. I got fed up of TV shows that I'd invested in. You know, I don't mind if there's, 20 episodes of they get together or not, but then if it gets cancelled before they get together, I get quite annoyed. How do you feel verticals fit in as just basically providing that romance for people?
I loved it because it was verticals are very much at the moment directly catered to that female audience, female gaze romance, which Hollywood completely sort of shut off. It's something that is sort of, a lot of them are by women writers for an audience that we know what we like, we know what we respond to. And it just delivers directly to that. We're not, it's not a male writer saying, this is what I think you want. And you're going to enjoy this, or a board of Hollywood executives saying, yeah, sure, women will like this, without actually really touching base on what things resonate with us. What I loved about Verticals is that it was like very much female forward, in the sense that like the romance was the centerpiece. And romance in publishing is one of the most lucrative, long-standing genres that there is. And it is widely ignored by sometimes mainstream media, legacy Hollywood, because for some reason it's seen as less, or it's seen as ridiculous, when these are very important tropes. These are very important, just as much as you would say, true crime or sci-fi or fantasy has that respect. There's no reason to respect romance any less. And so because Hollywood sort of made it a lower priority, and rom-coms a lower priority, and those feel-good moments, I don't know what's shifted to where we decided that was not worthwhile. But Verticals said, we're going to give you that. We're going to let you have all of these wonderful romances and all the tropes that you love and that you've been craving that the TV won't give you. We're going to give it to you. So it was the first place where I, even as a writer, was like, I get to write this in a visual format that's not really out there. And so I that's why I fell in love with it, is because all of a sudden I saw the tropes that I saw in my favorite romance books living on the screen in Verticals. And it was a space where finally we all felt like we can do this and we can deliver it to the audiences that we want to. And they're there. So that's something that I hope we continue to do. I don't think it needs to be elevated in the sense that romance isn't enough. It is enough. It's always been enough.
Yeah.
So if you can respect it, I think that's what Verticals did very well.
It's really interesting because I keep going back to books. I just feel that there's a parallel in the mainstream. I mean, I worked in a major bookstore. We never had a romance section. It was all literature,
Right.
It was, we didn't stock a lot of the kind of the Mills and Boon, the more romance stuff.
Yeah.
And then I feel that because that audience wasn't being catered for, they just circumvented it. So they went to Wattpad, and they went to, direct publishing on Kindle and other options. Yep. They went to Audible. And because that's done so well, it's forced its way in. So the book chain where I work now will have big tables of what we would call romance because of BookTok. Because all this stuff took up on BookTok. Obviously, BookTok is great for physical books because that looks better for your little reel rather than your Kindle.
Yeah.
And so actually it's forced its way in, and the bookshops had to stock these books and go, actually, this is what's people reading, rather than us going, it has to be literature and, there might be romance, but that's not really what it's about. And I feel like that's what's happened with Verticals.
It has. Yeah.
And that everyone's like, well, we'll circumvent it and we'll put what people actually want there.
Yeah.
And then now, obviously, everyone's like, oh, maybe we should pay attention to this.
Exactly. It took people saying, we're not writing you off, we hear you, and we're delivering on what you want. And it's not something where it's like, oh, yes, because I've heard so many voices say like, oh, it's just verticals are just a sweet romance right now, but, it'll get better. And I was like, what's wrong with it as it is? It's like, there's a major audience. And if you're not paying attention to the numbers of people who are moved and who enjoy these things, you are missing an opportunity to be able to really engage with them and give them shows, give them experiences that they love. So I would never ignore an audience. I would never look down at an audience, because these are people who are ready to hear your stories. They want them to be told. They want to live in them. They want to enjoy them. They want to tell their friends about them. So give them the stories, why not? Yeah.
I want to ask you a little bit about some of the booktop tropes, because I feel that some have come over and are there in verticals. So, we have quite a lot of forced proximity, whether that's, the wedding or, they're having to live in the same place. And we have a lot of, enemies to lovers. Can't go wrong with that.
Yes.
I want to ask about Grumpy Sunshine. I don't feel we see that much in verticals.
No, we haven't done that yet. I think that's something that we should absolutely do, because that's such a hit and it's so fun. We should do this. Noted.
Yeah, because I feel that I've seen really good Korean and Chinese dramas with Grumpy Sunshine trope, playing both ways. But I just feel, I feel there's a gap in verticals there for that. So yeah.
Okay.
Write
it down.
Like a request list of Jen to Jenny.
Yes.
For you, what are you kind of looking for in your head makes a great romance? Kind of what are the, whether you're a reviewer, reader or writer, just kind of what are the things that for you make a romance stand out? What are the beats, or I guess the character things that you look for?
I think what's always sort of resonated with me with great romances are characters who really struggle to admit that they're falling in love, and the sort of the watching the chaos of them realize their feelings for the other person, and how beautifully, and the sort of the pacing of how that's constructed, and eventually get to the payoff where they do finally, even though everyone else around them knows, they know and they accept this. I think that execution, and then the depth of character, for me, it's in the struggle. The most exciting part is when they're trying to get there and they're awkward and they're fumbling. And this is why I love YA, is that I love the fact that it's such a chaotic, unstable time, and you're just grappling with, who you are for the first time, how you feel. And things are in very big extremes. Like this person is, the moon and the stars. Whereas we become adults, we sort of go like, okay, obviously when I was a teenager, I was a little bit like, everything felt like the end of the world. Yeah. But that's what makes it a great place to storytell, is because those stakes are immediately heightened. Everything is so important and the losses are so grave. I think just having that dynamic shift, and then watching the characters struggle and grow into who they are and being comfortable with what they want, is what really draws me to a great romance. And just the depth of characters. I like characters that have interesting complexities. Certainly more of my book side is characters that have a lot of struggles. Who've experienced loss, who experience difficulty in a home, people who feel like very real everyday people, and they're able to be resilient regardless of what they've been through. And then they find that person, and the guy sees them, and she's like, I didn't think that was going to happen. And both of them learn things about each other in that way. So I love that in a great romance. I think that's what makes it exciting for you.
So yeah, I love your answer. So when you've handed in your script as a vertical writer, kind of what happens next? Do you have any further involvement, or are you then where the fan is and just waiting for it to come out and see how it's being interpreted?
It really depends on which teams you're working for. I've had times when I've been extremely involved in the entire process, and I've had times where it's much more hands-off. It just depends on the nature of the production, who you're working with, what opportunities you have. In my new role, I've stepped more into the creative producer side, so I'm very much involved in sort of moving it to the production, away from just the script itself and turning it in. It's like, okay, it's gone. But looking at things like casting, having a lot of relationships and learning from different actors who I've gotten to work with in the past, saying, oh, this person would be wonderful for it. Helping shape, even musically, finding out, okay, what does the show sound like? When I first came to Los Angeles, I had the pleasure of being able to Um, Spent a lot of time with John Powell, who's one of the most incredible film scorers. And everything that he does is amazing. And just watching that process, like I fell in love with film scoring. Um, and so for me, finding the right sound for a show is really important. And um, working with the team creatively to say, okay, this is what this is what it sounds like. Working with your production team to say, okay, what is our, how are our characters going to look? What world are we in? What locations really make this story come to life? And then being on set day to day. And sometimes you're making changes in the script. Sometimes you are, just helping creatively inform a decision that you've made, or help the directors, sort of guide something. If you're like, oh, this is sort of what I had intended for this moment, getting to watch the actors bring a script to life will never not be exciting. It's the most incredible part of the job, is being able to see the people who are very passionate about these characters physically embody them, and you're just like, it's super exciting. So and then post-production is, giving notes on edits, understanding, okay, what works for us, what doesn't, where can we make things more powerful now that we've shot the actual vertical. So I've been fortunate enough to be involved in everything from pre to post, or, a large amount of the creative process. So I've done both. I like the whole.
That's amazing. And then what for you are the most rewarding bits?
Always, I think watching auditions is really fun, because you have no idea if these things really work until you hear people reading them. And my roommate, of course, is like a very talented like voice actor. So I get some pre-insight, because she's able to do the voices, and I'm like, great, okay, cool. I'm glad it sounds like it works. But when you see the actors, who may actually be the person who becomes that role, that is always exciting. I think it's my favorite part, is being able to see um, who brings their approach to the character in a way maybe that surprises you, and you go, I never thought about it that way, but this person is perfect for it. So I do have a love for casting. Being on set is my favorite. It's very long days, extremely long days, and a lot of hours, but it doesn't feel like work. But I've spent a lot of time on set just working in production, so it's not abnormal. It may be, if you're coming in as a new writer and you haven't been on set before for your show, that is a long day. So be prepared. But it's very fun. And I think if you're enjoying the entire process, it just feels like a dream to watch something you wrote just a few weeks before coming to life. So I think that's still the best part of the job. Yeah.
And is that one of the, I keep coming back to that, it seems to be one of the most exciting bits about verticals. Partly, obviously, as viewers, we love it because we get content, but actually to be able to write something and get a project out and on screen to show on your CV, because I hear that films, you could have something, but it could be 3 years or so before it actually appears.
Yeah.
So is that another advantage of verticals, just the sheer speed with which your work can then be on screen for people to look at?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the most exciting things when I'm working with new writers or new sort of creatives coming into the space. I was like, you are going to be, especially if they come from traditional film and television, I was like, you're going to start shooting probably within about a month and a half, like from start to, like, when you finish your script. Usually have about a month to finish the script, and then you're in pre-production pretty quickly. And then, yeah, it's about a month and a half from when you start to when you get into production, which is shocking for them, because it's like, I can't believe there are teams ready to go, and you just have everything put together. The pipeline is very quick and sophisticated, because it's very efficient in terms of being able to get things done much faster. I'm still amazed at the volume at which DramaBox and Reelshort are able to put out shows, just because as we're getting into this emerging market, all different apps are really streamlining that process. So it is truly mind-blowing when a script can get to screen in, honestly, a blink of an eye compared to the traditional film industry. So it's very exciting.
So of your projects, which are your favourites? The ones that you've done so far, and also anything you've got upcoming? What are the ones that have a special place in your heart?
I had the most fun with Pride and Prejudice. I just had such a good time, because it was it was just such an interesting project to make it vertical. And it was, when you take something that's a classic and you're like, all right, we're just going to reimagine it through this new lens, and fully knowing that there would be people who would be like, I have this this is not the same thing. And I was like, great, that's what we want. We want to have familiar things, but we also want to sort of take a classic and put it into this new format. We haven't done much of that. So that was really fun because it was very new. I really enjoyed doing, it's hard. That's tricky. I really loved, um, Double Life of My Military Man was really fun. In the sense that like there were just crazy things happening. It was like special agents and, doctors and all kinds of things. And it was just such a intensely high stakes, unconventional vertical completely, where it was just like, let's throw in a bunch of things that we haven't done before. I tended to do a lot of experimental projects where it's like, let's try it. Let's do something completely out of the box, which is fun. And you have no idea whether or not going to be successful. I'm learning now. I'm really interested in sort of like veering more towards like, okay, what is more mainstream? I'm waiting for the day when I can do like YA proper, waiting very much because that's my dream. That's my area. But yeah, I really enjoyed Double Life of My Military Men just because it was really like we really moved at breakneck speed and it was very exciting on set. And Rebecca and Kiki were fantastic, and we all had a really good time, and it was very intense. So it was just a fun series of days, and I think you feel that intensity in the project for sure.
Yeah. So with those ones, I'm presuming you were given a brief of this is the project, go for it. Is that still the case, or is it more that you can now go in and pitch an idea and build it from the ground up? Kind of how does it work in most? I know it will vary from platform to platform.
Right. And I can speak now on Alta in terms of their process. The way that it's really fun for us is that we fully get the creative freedom to pitch. And we're really, I'm excited because my first show with Alta, we're in pre-production right now. We shoot very soon, and I'm really, really excited about that one. I can't talk about it, but I'm so excited about it because it was something where it was just like fully original idea, and working with a really wonderful creative team to bring that to life. I'm really excited to see it come on screen. But with at Alta TV, what I think is very different is that you get the freedom to really come up with a concept fully on your own and develop it and then execute it. And that's something that like, I know other platforms, sometimes they'll say, well, this is sort of what we're looking for. This is what the market's dictating. And while we keep those, that data in mind, it's interesting to be able to really build a project from the ground up with a lot more freedom and flexibility to like pitch and watch it grow. So it's the first time I've had that experience, like all the way through. And that's really exciting. So that's really fun.
So I have to ask a few things. What tropes or bits of verticals would you like to throw away? Not have to do again.
Yes. I don't want any more abuse. The abuse needs to go away. I know that there wasn't a market at a time for the damsel in distress. And I think that there are ways, if we're going to continue to do damsel in distress, there's ways to still make women feel empowered and not not useless or helpless or just being like just the violence against women. I have a huge problem with. I'm really worried about that. I don't think that's something that we want to show as part of a relationship that people should be exploring. I know that it's very shocking and it certainly gets eyeballs, but I think that we have a younger generation who's watching this. We have a whole skew of audience members, but I don't want them to think that if I'm in an abusive relationship, I should hang on because eventually a billionaire will show up and rescue me from it. It's very dangerous, I think, in that regard, or to show that there's coercion. You can, I'll save you in exchange for your virginity. I understand that's a trope. I get it. But that's a very dangerous paradigm that we're setting up. There's certain things where abuse, toxic relationships. Another big one that I think is not talked about is the absolute lack of diversity in storytelling that has to change. As a woman of color, as a writer of color, I don't see anyone really who looks like me aside from being stuck in the roles as the friend or I don't know, or a criminal. It's great. I see a lot of, unfortunately, young men of color who get cast as the bad guy or the criminal and they get off screen. And then, of course, our casts are not diverse enough. I think that there's no reason to do that at all. We should have we should have evolved past this. And the more audiences that you're able to reach, if you diversify your cast, you diversify your audiences. And I don't think the paradigm is going to crumble because we invite more people to the table, more diverse storylines for diverse characters. And I know for all of us growing up, watching TV and finding someone who looks like you, or magazines and people who looks like you, when you didn't have that, it was discouraging because it said, okay, well, this bright and shiny world is for everybody but you. And I don't want to say that in VertiCast. That does not need to be where we start the conversation. I think we should start it where we say, listen, everyone's invited to the table, because at the same time, for us, it was film and television. For young guys and girls who are watching verticals and maybe they're in high school, middle school, they're also looking to see, is this something that I can do? Is this a story that is about someone like me? And if we don't represent them there, we're doing the same thing all over again. I don't think we have to go back 30 years. So I'm really hoping that we have more people of color in the space and we have more casts that are more diverse so that we can show there are stars that are not just fitting within one look and feel, that we can open up to everyone else. I really hope for that. Yeah.
Is there anything as viewers that we can do? Because I know that it kind of sits with the apps. I mean, is it just something just keep talking about and go, look, why aren't you fixing this? This is what we want to watch. Is that probably the best way to go about it, do you think?
I mean, I think honestly, it's anytime I see a conversation about this, I get so excited because there's a conversation happening. And I do think that the apps do pay attention. I know that writers certainly pay attention. I know that we're very aware of this. I think that this is something that the more noise that's being made, and especially where it's, for companies, when things start affecting their bottom line, they pay very close attention. But if you see a departure, for example, all of a sudden people say, okay, well, we're not going to engage with this. Or maybe if the show has buzz, it may not be positive buzz, where it's like, hey, we don't want to see shows, or we don't want to support apps that are exclusionary, intentionally exclusionary. We want to be able to support apps and shows that are going to diversify their casts and characters. I think Candy Jar is doing an exceptional job of that. And I really gravitate towards them because I was like, oh, good, they understand. So I'm hoping that as we continue to evolve, that like if fans continue to talk, generate online buzz, create communities where we can direct the people who work behind the scenes to create verticals and say, listen, these are the conversations that are happening. I always direct people to Vertical Drama Lover. I'm like, if you want to know what the fans are saying, we're very much in the data world, but we're not in the conversation. And one of the biggest value points that I learned from Wattpad is that conversation is critical. We have to be there where fans are responding. What are they saying? What do they like? What they don't like? And if we can just sort of have that collective space where I could be able to say, here, go to this place in this reel, see what fans think about this, or look at this response that they had to the show, that would just make a world of difference, because they have to know, they have to see it. Oh, well, I don't really hear anybody talking about it. So where's this conversation? Where's this pushback?
True. Yeah, no one said anything. Okay, right. You've given me, I'm on it. Okay. Because I find it bizarre, because I, as a viewer, just want to watch a good romance. So I've watched everything. I mean, one of my top 10 movies of all time is Love and Basketball, which Omar Epps.
Yeah.
I love that movie so much. I think that's the best ever kind of growing up friends. Oh, that movie is perfection. But, I've watched all over. I've watched Filipino, I've watched Japanese, I've watched Indonesian, I've watched Bollywood. And all I want to watch is people fall in love. It's like, I've watched, student stuff made for YouTube, but it's got a good used love story on it. So, I find it very bizarre. It's like, thinking that as a white woman, I wouldn't be interested in watching anything but myself on screen. And even me as a viewer, and my screen's got a very weird colour there. But then beyond that, like all the people who aren't seeing anyone like themselves on the screen, it's like, well, if you're going to look at just, as you said, just numbers, like, hello, that's a lot of people with spending power that you're completely ignoring and making you feel excluded. So, yeah.
I really hope to see that change. I remember being on set in Atlanta, and we had a wonderful hair and makeup department. 2 other Black women came up to me and they said, I would watch these, but are there any of them that have us in them? And I said, I honestly can't tell you. At that time, I was like, there's maybe 2, 3 as leads. Yeah. And they said, well, they're losing a whole audience, and that we have to change that. I think we can do better. We already know how. It's not rocket science. I think it just takes, more progressive decisions. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a watch your space work to be done.
Yes.
This is like going from something serious and really important. This is something really frivolous, but I did want to ask, what is it about the name Jennifer and Verticals?
I don't know.
Because if you don't know, when our name turns up in Verticals, Jennifer's are often the bad guy. I don't know if it's because, like, it's like, Jennifer, what have you done? And she's always stomping around, and she's a terrible villainess in the background. How
Right.
do names work in Verticals? Like, where do they come from?
Honestly, for me, it's a Google search, and I'll say, okay, what are 1,000 girl names, and what or like what are great villain names? I've never seen Jennifer pop up, by the way, so I don't know what that's about. It just stopped. I don't know who made
I've just obviously got a fixation now. I'm always the bad guy. Yeah.
I feel called out. I don't appreciate that, but I'm not sure. I mean, usually you just, from my process, I can't speak for anybody else's. I'll just go to Google and look for names that I think sound nice together. And yeah, that's the point where you're just like, this needs the least amount of brain power, but you'd be surprised. It takes a lot more time.
Well, that's really interesting. So you said you're not only looking for names, but names that sound nice together. So you kind of thinking about as a couple, like
yes.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work as a couple name, because you also want to make sure that, like, if people ship them, they're going to have their combined couple name. If it sounds cacophonic, it's not going to work.
Detail that the people need, you see. I just want to end with just some of your recommendations, because I feel no one better to ask. Okay, so either all of them. Favorite romantic movies, maybe ships from TV shows and novels. Just in the world of Jenny Rosen, what would you be saying to people? This is what you need to watch and read.
Favorite romantic movie? Oh my goodness.
You can do several. You'd have to narrow it down to one. That's too hard.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that is. Okay. This is so difficult. All of a sudden, every romance movie I've ever seen in my life is this flash. Okay. Well, maybe we'll start with books. It's also difficult. Oh my goodness. Let me see. What was one of my favorite romances? This is a problem of, like, consuming in such amounts that I'm like, are there favorites? I don't know.
Or maybe authors that like they'll deliver.
Okay. So obviously E.L. Lockhart, anything that she does is fantastic. I really enjoy just generally her approach to romance is gorgeous. If you want something sort of a little bit more fun and mainstream, I like Elle Kennedy, does really fun new adult romances. They're a good time. I know it's controversial, but I think if you just want to sort of go to the ground floor of a self-published author that really broke open the space, Colleen Hoover is absolutely worth looking into. The way in which she was able to sort of kick open really was one of the first authors who was self-publishing in kind of young adult romance at a time when it was pretty frowned upon, and then went on to be very successful. I think I like that she had a combination of poetry and regular prose. It was fun. I just enjoyed that a lot. And that's an emotional roller coaster. Controversy aside, just enjoy the feels. Don't get into anything else. Let me see. Oh, my goodness gracious. Romance films. A lot of the 90s films I still are my go-tos. Like While You Were Sleeping is so fun. I revisited that recently and I was just like, these are fantastic. Obviously Sleepless in Seattle. You've got I'm skewing older. Let me try to move things into the modern context. I loved a lot of the early like the Cinderella Story. Princess Diaries is always is a go-to. If you like that, you have to go back to She's All That. These are hallmarks for verticals if you haven't. These are you have to go back to these. I love Cruel Intentions. It's definitely really not the original, by the way. That was that informed a lot of my enemies to lovers obsession. If you have not seen the original, that is a must on the reading list. And of course, you have Nicholas Sparks. The Notebook is required. So Gen Z, if you have not seen The Notebook, you need to stop everything that you're doing and just deep dive into that. Because I've had a lot of my friends who are Gen Z and they're like, I haven't seen it. I was like, okay,
Oh my God.
we got to go back. We need to
Yes.
stop everything. So these are, I'm trying to think of late. I really
I'd also
enjoyed.
do a shout out for Walk to Remember as well.
Yes. Oh my
That's
goodness.
got to be one of the best sort of bad boy
That's
redemption stories.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it will break you. So just be prepared for that.
Oh, I mean, it's Nicholas Sparks, everyone. You will be broken, but you'll love it.
You'll love it.
Yeah.
Of late, I really enjoyed, my Oxford year was fun. I thought that was really enjoyable. If you like, I really got into the Wattpad series, movie series through my window. That was really fun. It's a really interesting YA Wattpad adaptation. It was a Spanish book, but it's great. So if you're looking for sort of the newer, fresher YA romances, that's a really good one. So yeah, I think that's all for now, only because my brain is fried with the amount of all the better suggestions at a later point.
They're all really good suggestions. Okay, final question. Okay, so you're casting, and this is like the moment where you know Verticals have made it. Is there like an actor or actress where you're like, when so-and-so is doing a vertical and they're in my story, I know I've made it?
Corey Milchrist I think he's a super talent. And I think I remember watching Queen Charlotte and being like, oh, wow, he brings everything that you look for in a romantic male lead. And what I love about his performances is that like you can immediately tell sort of the reverence he has for women. And I think that's something that kind of sometimes goes under the radar with romantic leads. Is they'll say like, oh, he's a good looking guy and this and that's about it. But I was like, when you have someone whose gaze communicates that they love, and you get that emotional depth and you get that emotional payoff. So he's someone who I'm excited to see where he goes. If he were in one of my verticals, I'd be thrilled. That would be great.
Love that. That's such a good ending. I just want to say thank you so, so much.
Thank you
This
so
has just
much.
been so incredibly useful for people, and you're an absolute superstar. I'm so grateful you're here in the space and writing stories that I want to watch.
Yes, thank you so much, Jen, and thank you for all that you're doing. It is amazing what you've built, and I'm excited to just continue to see it grow. And if you're a Vertical fan and you are not aware of Vertical Drama Love, stop now and go and make sure that you follow them on Instagram. It's an amazing space for all of us, not just Vertical fans, but also creatives. If you're anyone in the space, I just think it's an amazing resource that we all didn't know that we needed. And then it popped up and I was like, we needed this. This is required. So yeah, I hope a lot more people support the work that you're doing because it's great. It's been great.
Thank you.